That's good. Today, we've got a list of things that we have scheduled for webinars today. It's going to be about patch management and the reporting aspect of patch management. If you look at patch management in Zenworks, obviously we had patch management a long time already, but we made some significant changes with the update 3 release. So update 3, we introduced what we call the next generation patch management. We changed the feed, so we are using an external feed that we've got with patch content, and we actually changed the feed that we've got with patch information. And with that, we changed the architecture behind patch management on the primary server itself. With that, we also started to use the so-called on-demand content system. With update 2, we introduced on-demand content as part of the anti-malware component. So anti-malware, you can imagine that if you have antivirus signature files, they can change multiple times a day. So it doesn't make sense to have like a synchronization once a day and then distribute that through your content repository with a bundle. It's much more dynamic. So with antivirus, we started with what is called on-demand content, where if the workstation doesn't need to do a scan, it will check to see how old its signature file is. If it's more than a few hours, it will actually check to see if the satellite server has a newer version. If the satellite has a new version, it will get it immediately. Otherwise, the satellite will ask it upstream. And obviously you can configure the timeouts for that. But it means that the signature files are much more dynamic. That on-demand content system, we now made it available to patch management as well, but you can also use the same for bundles. So if the content is not available on the satellite will just ask it on demand to get the information to the satellite. Still, you can pre-cache that information as well, but we go into details about that. So the next generation patch management. If you look at what we've done in the past, obviously patch management has a long history. Initially, it was a standalone product that we used to partner with a company called PatchLink, and they were providing us with basically the patch management server, and we were just rebranding that as Novell at that time. With the introduction of Zenworks 10, we still partner with the same OEM partner. They actually created some of the patch content or the patch logic that we had on the primary server, and we were still using that. And so it was completely tightly integrated with what we've got with Zenworks Suite. So the Zenworks framework was actually, the patch management was just embedded as soon as you install Zenworks. It's already in the system. At that time, we didn't have policies yet. We had something called baseline. So we changed it to policies to be more flexible. We've added things like the Office 365 support, where you've got, where the update runs a little bit different than what you normally do for patches. And eventually we added the dashboards where you've got the patch status and your CVE information ultimately. So that's what we've done before. So there's a few things that we do with the new patch management. First of all, the scanning is a lot faster. The scan engine is a lot faster. That has to do with different aspects. One of the aspects is that we're not scanning per software installers anymore. I'll get back to that later on. You can actually enable that if you want. The second benefit is that the patch feed that we use now has a lot more products within its database. So and actually it grows a little bit faster than what we used to do before. As mentioned, we're now using the on-demand streaming. So it's more flexible. The on-demand, and it means that you can clean out your patches easily as well, because if it's needed again, it will just download it again. Nowadays bandwidth is enough, and obviously you can change the timeouts of that. So if you want to keep your data on the satellite, you can just extend the timeout, but it's easier to remove the information. The biggest benefit, in my opinion, is the last one. It's the amount of data that we store in the Zenworks database. That has gone down dramatically. If you look at the old patch management, for every patch, we would create a bundle in our database. Yeah, so a bundle that would be able to distribute that patch. Now we're not using those bundles anymore. Yeah, it's all happening through that on-demand content system, and that's a lot more efficient in the way that we do that. The other thing is that we're not putting so things that are not applicable for your environment will not become part of your database. Yeah, so that reduces the amount of data that we've got in the database as well. So with all these changes on this page, yeah, if you are not familiar with the fact that these changes have happened, you will not see a difference. Yeah, you're still got your patch policies. The screens that you have are still the same. Yeah, so from an administrative point of view, there's no change, while underneath, yeah, the whole patch management system has changed. With this, by the way, we also put patch management into a Docker container. So what's behind it? Well, I've already mentioned it's a new patch feed that we use. So that's a different feed that we have that goes into Zenworks. With that, we also have a new Zenworks agent for the patch management agent. The patch management agent is part of your Zenworks, so that happens automatically. The nice thing is that the patch agent also in the past was part of a bundle that we would push out. If you are moving to the 23.3 or the update 3, and you've still got like 2017 update 4 agent in your environment, you're still able to run your new patch manager as well. You've got some dependencies. We do require .NET 4.8, for example, on the machine, but because the patch management agent is part of a bundle, it will still work with an older version of the agent as well. Yeah, so that's but the agent changed. Yeah, so the discovery and the applying patches that happens on the workstation, that's a new module. Obviously on the server itself, so on the primary server, we have a new service that runs the patch management component. That's a microservice, so that's a Docker container that we are able to perform. So that's the components. Underneath, we're now utilizing the on-demand content. You're still able to pre-cache, and we'll have a look at that. So you can still, if you've got a new policy generated, you can still say, for the things that are in this patch policy, I already want to download them, so that I'm not waiting for that download until the workstation requests it. So this is how the old system worked. So the old system, you would have on your primary server, you would configure what your patch management server was. So one of the primary servers needed to be assigned as the patch management server. And on that server, it would do a daily synchronization. So every night, typically you do that in the night, the Zenworks server would synchronize its patch information with the information that was available on the internet. Based on that information, it would create something that was called the DAU, so the Discover Applicable Updates. So that would then be used on the workstation to scan the workstation. So the DAU was a bundle that we generated. It would be distributed to workstations, and it would do the scan for those patches that are needed based on what was in this DAU file. After that, the information was sent back to the server, and that's put into the database. Now, step 3 was that you then have your patch policies. The workstations would run the patch policy, and then patches will be applied. If we look at how it works from update 3 onward, so with the update 3 and with the 23.3, your workstation will request a DAU file from the internet. So instead of building this DAU file on the server itself, it's much more like the antivirus system, where you can have a DAU file that changes multiple times a day. Just look at it as a signature file that we've got for antivirus. In this case, it's a signature file that identifies vulnerabilities. So the workstation, at the time that it needs to do a vulnerability scan, it will request the last version of the DAU file. And you've got some timeouts within that, but you can actually, if the DAU file changes multiple times a day, it will actually get the last version of the file. It will then do the scan based on that DAU file and then send the information back to the server on what it has discovered. Yeah. So if you look at what the server then stores, it will store those files that are those patches that are actually recognized in the system. So things that are not applicable in your environment will not get into your database. Yeah. Obviously, step 2 is similar to what you've had before. It will apply the patch policy. And in that case, we're using this on-demand content system. You can do a little bit with the patch policy. You can actually pre-cache things that are in the policy so that it already gets downloaded on the server. But if you do not do that, it will just request those. It will request the patches and will actually get downloaded from the internet if they're not available on the server yet. So that's the change that we've had. No more synchronization once a day. It's much more dynamic. Yeah, so that's the big benefit. The workstation will download that signature file, and yeah, that's just using this on-demand content system, and it will only delivers those things that to the server that are actually recognized on the machine. Yeah, so if you're not using Firefox, you will not see Firefox patches in your list of patches. It means that is not in the database. Yeah, so that's a big benefit. And so also, if you create your patch policies, in the past you would see the list of vendors. Now, if you create your patch policies, you will only see those vendors that have been recognized in the environment. Yeah. So also for that, it actually makes it more easy, because a lot of the things that are, well, if you do not use certain software, it will actually not show up in the list. If you do create your patch policies, we've also made some additional changes there. What I always hated is the fact that if you do patch policies, you could recalculate every so many days, but it was also always a fixed amount of days. You could do it once a week, then obviously it's logical. But if you would like to recalculate your patch policies once a month, you had to set it to like 30 days. And then once in a while, you need to offload that a little bit, because it was not tied to a schedule. Yeah. Now you're tied to a schedule. So in your patch policy, you've got your patch schedule. Let me just go to a policy. So if you go to your security, here we got our patch policies. And if I look at my all Microsoft Critical, for example, now if you got your patch schedule, in the past you had so many days, now we've got this schedule. Yeah. So in the schedule, it's the scheduler that we use for a lot of other things in Zenworks as well. Yeah. So on bundles, you can do the same on when to distribute. Yeah. So you can specify what day of the week you would like to do that, or if you want to do that monthly or on a fixed interval. So it's it's much more like we do with other things in the system. Down below, there's another change. So for every patch policy, so in the past, we had the option to approve after successful test enforcement. So basically, the old policy was like this: publish after successfully enforcing it to all of your test devices. So you can mark devices as test device. They will initially run this patch installation. After the test devices have been successful, then other devices will get the patch as well. And if you want it, you could specify that you can have a delay for so many days. Now you're a little bit more flexible. This was one option that we didn't have in the past. You could not publish immediately. Publish immediately means that if the patch is recognized and you're rebuilding your patch policy, it will immediately become effective to all of your devices. So it doesn't go through the test cycle. The other thing that we've changed is that you can actually do a percentage. So if 50% of your test devices has successfully installed the patch, you can then already approve the patch. So it doesn't wait for all of the test devices to go through. I think this one is useful, especially if you've got certain vendors where you say, well, I'm this vendor, I trust this, I would like to apply this immediately. Maybe for your Microsoft patches, that's the operating system, you would like to be a bit more careful, because if something happened with the operating system, your system might not be available. But if you want to update your Chrome versions, for example, you could say, well, if there's a new version of Chrome, I'm not going to wait for this test cycle to come out. I'm going to publish this immediately. Yeah, so this is one thing that we've changed in the way that we do that. So let me go back to my slides. So the schedule and the immediate publish has been added, and you can actually do the percentage of your system. Next to the fact that we've got next to the default patches where we just are running the installer, there's a few that we are not able to update in the same way. Most obvious example is Office 365 applications where Microsoft has their own update mechanism. What we can do is we can trigger the update in that environment. So you can still manage that update, but you can't download the update separately and then apply that. So we actually need to use the update mechanism that exists within the Office 365 environment. So this is what we call the native update channels. So we will just trigger the update to happen in that framework. So that's the native stuff. For Office 365, you actually need to configure Office 365 to be so that it can update. Next to that, you need to allow a third-party management tool to trigger that update. Yeah, you can do that with a group policy, or you can do that with the registry key. Yeah, if you put the registry key in, that means that Office allows you to manage that through a third-party system. And if you do this, we're then able to apply these patches to the Office 365 environment. I've mentioned software installers a while back. If you look at your Zenworks systems, if you look at your patches, so let me go back to my security page, go to all my patches. There's 3 categories of patches. You've got critical patches, you've got recommended patches, you've got software installers. In practice, so what we've seen at a lot of customers is that hardly anyone was using the software installers. Software installers, you could, for example, install Chrome on a machine that doesn't have Chrome yet. So because there's so very few customers using that, by default, we're now only scanning for critical and recommended patches. So that reduces the amount of load that you got in your database as well. So by default, we're just scanning for these critical and recommended patches, just the things that are already on the workstation. We are scanning for that. If you do want to scan for software installers as well, you can still enable that. You need to put a key in the system variables, and if you do that, it will then search for the software installers as well. So if you want to, you can do it, but as mentioned, most customers actually ignore this, and it just saves you some load on your database. Remediation page, we've changed a few things on the remediations. If you schedule a patch, we've changed a few. One of the things you could agree with the license. The license now automatically approves those already. So that was kind of a bit of an old-fashioned way to do a historic thing that we had in. Last contact and reboot time. So that's what you see on the device as well. So obviously, if you do patching, one of the important things with some of the patches is that they require a reboot. So if you say, well, I'm gonna ignore the reboot, it could be that, well, people put their PC to sleep every time and never do reboot. So in Zenworks, you can now do things based on the last reboot time. So you can create policies, for example, on that or you can create a bundle that would enforce the reboot, for example, if the device has not been rebooted for a long time. If you do move from Zenworks 2020 update 2 to 2020 update 3, if you just go through the update process for that, you will not be using the patch management system yet. So if you upgrade from update 2 to update 3, the old patch management feed will still be functional. if you want to move to the new feed, you actually need to go through a migration process. And after the migration, you'll get to this new patch management feed. It's important that you do go through that migration because eventually that legacy patch feed is actually going to move away. Yeah, so from the 31st of May next year, the old patch management feed will actually be dropped. So before that, customers that have patch management, they will have to move to either 2020 update 3 or the later versions and do the migration. Otherwise, your patch management is not going to function anymore. Obviously, if you do go through that migration, you need to have your license key. If you upgrade your, if you renew your license after the what was it? March 21, I believe it was later than that. But if you renew your license now, it means that the old patch management feed is not supposed to work anymore. And I think in general it does work, but you're supposed to use the new patch management feed afterwards. I believe that for most customers that's actually not completely true. It's still valid. We kept it alive because of the fact that AirGap is not supported yet in the new patch management feed, or was not supported yet, and macOS patches were not supported yet. So the patch feed was still available, but from May 31st onward, it will actually be gone. If you want to move to the new patch management feed, you need to be at least at Zenworks 2020 update 3, or you can go to the 23.3 if you want. All your managed devices, we recommend that they would be to update 3, but it's not necessary. So if you want, you can keep Zenworks 2017 agents. In some cases, we need that for platform compatibility. So you can do that, and patch management can actually run on that. But you have to have .NET 4.8 installed on those devices. Then they will be able to just apply the patch DAU. Other thing, what you want to do with a firewall. So if you do go to the new patch management feed, some firewall things have changed. Obviously, that's in the documentation. In your old system, you were used to the fact that you had one patch management server, and that would download the content from your from the internet. Now you still need to have one, so that's to verify the license. That's one specific server that would do that. That's the server that you assign as a patch management server. You could have multiple servers being the on-demand content master. They can actually download things from the internet if you want to. So it doesn't have to be a single server anymore like we had it in the past. You can have multiple servers that are the on-demand content master. But then obviously they need to get access to the internet to download patch content, so the DAU file, and the patches itself. So that's the firewall requirements. If you do, this is a very uncommon scenario. So sometimes you had customers creating bundles that would then use a software installer, for example, that we have within the patch management system. If you are referring to the old patch management bundles in that way, that's giving problems with the upgrade. So if you do this, the migration wizard will fail. But this is not something that I've seen it with a few customers, but not with many. So obviously, if you do the migration, typically, if you do things on your primary server, we recommend you to do backup anyway of your Zenworks database and maybe also of your primary server. As soon as you do that migration, you need to stop. Well, migration will basically wipe all of your system. So this is the migration process. It will shut down all your patch services. It will remove everything that is related to patch management. So it will remove all your patch bundles, and it will remove the database of patches, and the status is on what is patched and what is not patched. that sounds like a lot of things that get deleted, but what you'll see is if you got your managed environment, as soon as you enable patch management again after the migration, your workstation will do a DAU scan, and within a couple of days, your database will be filled again with those patches that are applicable in your environment. What retains is your patch policies and your patch configuration settings. The patch policies, we are putting them to inactive. So you have to go through your list of patches. In some cases, for example, for Microsoft, in the old patch feed, Microsoft was marked as Microsoft Inc. Now it's Microsoft. So, and you need to change that in your patch policy. So verify your patch policy rules, and then you can make them effective again. And yeah, the wizard helps you go through the environment. So that it will, yeah, go through, ask some questions about what you want to do with patches. In the past, with 2020 update 3, there were 2 scenarios where customers should not upgrade. That was in the system where you've got air-gap customers, and it was the situation where you've got macOS customers. On macOS, we were able to do the remediation of third-party applications, but not for the operating system itself. So that's actually now fixed in the 2020 update 3. So let's have a look at air-gap first. So air-gap is a situation that we see with a limited number of customers where they've got a completely isolated network that is not connected to the internet. So what you can do then is you can download your patches, you can put them on a disk, and then use that internally. So this is basically what you see. You've got a server that is your normal Zenworks server that will download information from the internet. You need to do some configuration changes on that zone so that you download all of the patches, regardless of what's on them, on what you recognize within the system. So it's a bit different than what you see in a normal environment. As soon as you enable, there's a few settings that you need to do. It will just download all patches. You can then export that to a disk, and you can then utilize that into your air-gap zone. You can just import that with what we call a data deoda. So that's the portable media. So you can actually put it on a disk and get that to the internal environment. Or you got specific devices that called data deoda, where data can only traffic and can only flow from one side to the other. So that's the data deoda devices that you can use. It basically just synchronizes directories, a certain directory. And on the air-gap zone, it will import that information into the zone so that patches can be distributed in that offline environment. Next is macOS patching. We were able to do patches for third-party applications, but not for the operating system itself. So we've changed that with the 23.3. So now we are able to do OS patches on macOS 11, 12, and 13. And we do lots of different third-party vendors. So the third-party vendors didn't change, but the operating system itself changed. So we do that both on the Intel and ARM architectures from macOS 11 onward. Patch itself will remain the same. So there's not much. So the logic that you have with Windows and Apple is quite similar. With Intel, we do require admin rights. As soon as you've got the Zenworks agent, that will require this admin right. With the ARM system, there's some additional things that you need. You need to get a volume ownership, and there's some additional things that you need to do on that. The Zenworks agent can do part of that, but there's some additional steps that you need to do. If you have certain patches that are small, they will go through the content system. There's some patches that are bigger than 1 gig. Then it's doing that natively by the macOS system. So each device will do it directly from the vendor. Okay. Last part of what we have. So if there's questions, by the way, just please feel free to raise your voice and ask them. If we look at reporting, reporting for patch management has not changed at all. So the reporting itself, so reports that you've done in the past will just continue to work. If you create your own custom reports in the reporting engine. The difference is that the amount of data that we've got in the database is a lot less. As mentioned, all of the data will be removed during migration, and we only have applicable patches in the database, and that reduces the load that we got on the patch on the database. So the performance has improved quite a bit. Still, in some really large environments, we do see that certain things for patch management reporting can be a bit slow. Now, that has to do with the indexes that we've got on the patch database. We're actually planning to do some additional optimization for this patch management reporting in the 23.3 release or 23.4 release. So that's currently being worked on. Now, so we got some universities that have 20,000 devices. Yeah, then you've got the question: do you put Vertica in place? So Vertica copies basically the content that you got in your Zenworks database, and you can then run the reports against Vertica. The downside of Vertica is that it takes a lot of additional resources on your machine, and obviously it's an additional component that could only complicate things. So yeah, for most customers, they prefer to use without Vertica. Because it takes a lot of resources on your primary server as well. And because of the change that we've seen with the, because of the fact that there's a lot less data in the database, we've seen that the performance has improved quite a bit already. But if we're now working to do some additional work on the indexes that we have to further enhance the reporting capabilities. There is a very old school solution that Jason Blackett wrote a long time ago. That's using, so if you look at reporting, let me go to my reporting server and create an add-on view. So in the add-on view, you typically select what is called a domain. Yeah, so here we got the Zenworks domain, we got the Zenworks bundle domain, and the audit domain. Yeah, so for patch details, you typically take your Zenworks domain, and that allows you to build your default patch reports. Now, the downside is that this Zenworks domain does not have any information about patch policies. So Jason at some point wrote a so-called topic. You can see that the icon in front of this is a little bit different. A topic is basically a plain SQL query that you define and that you can add as a as a topic. Yeah, it's called a topic. You need to use Jasper reports for that. So the administrative component for that, the Windows client. But that's what you can use to create this topic, and you can then create reports from that. This one actually is now with the reporting server 811. We got some problems with that one. There's some spaces in names of the topic that give problems in the 811. So we're actually working on a new version of the of this topic. If you are using the one that Jason created a long time ago, let me know. We've got we've got some steps to how to fix that. But there's an update of this being created. There were some issues with Jaspersoft itself as well. So there were some issues with some of the components of Jasper. So that has some problems with the topic. But for the rest, if you use a normal Zenworks domain, you can just create the patch policies as you were used to. So if your patch reports, go through that. So some of you have seen this one, I assume already. So if from here you can select your patches. So if we select patches, I can say OK. And then you can build your own report. Now the server is a bit slow because it's running in the US. From here, you can just, first of all, you can specify what you would like to create. Just create my table. And then you can specify what you want to put into it. So I'll take the patch vendor, patch name, when it was released. And then we can do that per device. So I'll put the device name here. And then we can specify that we want to do things based on patch status. I'll create this as a filter where I'm going to say I would like to get everything that's not patched. Yeah, bang, then you'll get things that are not patched within the system per device. Yeah, so this is how we are able to build a report. This is something that you can then schedule if you want, and then send this out by email. So that's the this is not different from what you've done in the past with the previous versions of patch management. So all of the reporting will still remain the same. Any questions on what we've covered today? Yeah.
About patching Linux servers. It's on my to-do list with doing that with Zenworks, if possible. But you said it was not really possible, or how?
No, well, with Linux, what you'll have is that it actually uses the so there's two different ways to do Linux patching. First of all, you can make Zenworks your own. So with the subscribe and share, you can actually make the Zenworks server a repository. You can actually mirror your repository of the SUSE and Red Hat machines. So that would mean that your Zenworks server becomes like a hub in your system for updates. So if you do the SUSE subscription, your SUSE subscription will be an update. Your Zenworks server will become an update server for SUSE. You can actually point your SUSE servers to your Zenworks server to get the updates. For the patch management, you can so patch management will still able to detect what is needed on the patch, and that can then trigger that you need to then update. So it's similar to what you do with Office 365, where we tell Office 365 to do the update. That's similar with the Linux environment, where we basically tell SUSE, hey, you need to apply this patch. And we'll then use the native SUSE update channel to use that, but you can use the Zenworks server as an update channel. Yeah, so this is not specifically, so this is basically separate from patch management. You can do this with just Zenworks configuration management. Yeah, you can still make this your hub in the Zenworks in the /update system. Yeah. What patch management adds to that is that patch management is able to do the discovery to see what's still applicable on your Linux devices, and it can trigger SUSE to do its updates. Yeah, so obviously one of the limitations that we'll have with you want to do patching for Linux is the operating systems that we support. Yeah, we support Red Hat and we support SUSE, but we're not supporting Ubuntu. Yeah, so that's one of the things that we see once in a while. So if you want to do Linux patching, that's limited to those platforms that we support with Zenworks in general. So we had Red Hat, SUSE, and LeapOS as well. We looked at CentOS, but now Red Hat changed the way that they work with CentOS, so that's now gone. So that's the platforms that we support, and yeah, we're not supporting the Debian or Ubuntu based platforms. So that's the limitation that you have. Jesper, you've got a question as well.
Yeah, how do we manage this patch management part for the users that don't reboot the computers on a normal basis? I have a couple of, should we call them younger users, that just leave the computer on and then eventually it goes on standby. And if I want this patch management to work, for those that need reboots, I mean, force the reboot when it comes back alive again.
Yeah, so on the workstation nowadays, we, so if you, let me do, so if you have a workstation, let me take, I don't know which one. You now have a state, so we now do reboot pending state. So this will only appear if you got your, so why is this not showing up? I don't know. Normally last boot time is shown up. Reboot pending is not. So the last reboot, that's the one that you need. So you can actually see when the last time was that the machine was rebooted. Yeah. So what you could do is So you could create you can create a dynamic group, device group, that contains all the devices that had not been rebooted. Yeah, and that's the way you can trigger it. Yeah, it's a bit, yeah, it's not perfect, but it can at least give you, if you have certain patches, if you know that you want to reboot certain devices that have not been rebooted since a certain time, you can use this to assign something to all of those devices. The downside of this one is that you do not have a, well, I would like to get a reboot if it's not been rebooted for 2 weeks. Yeah, so it always is a specific date that we've got. So there's no, what is it, moving target. So if you want to do something, well, if it's not been rebooted for a month, you need to do reboot. Yeah, that doesn't work because you've got a date here. So that's something that we need to fix.
What about we have the reboot pending? Isn't that an option?
That's not in here, I think.
It is.
Reboot pending since, so that's the same.
It's still a date, so yeah.
It's not perfect, but it's what you can we on devices.
Well,
let's have another. So if we do an advanced search, we can probably look for those devices as well. This is probably a better way. So if we do a search for devices that have a pending reboot, device. Reboot pending. So here we can do a search for a specific date. This is how you can search for all your devices for have a pending reboot. And okay. I now do a search. It will give me those devices that are still pending reboot. Well, it's nothing in my environment, but this would give you a list of devices that are not rebooted for a long time. But I agree. Yeah, we should have some kind of mechanism to say, well, if it's not been rebooted for a certain amount of time, or if the pending reboot is more than a week or more than 2 weeks, yeah, in that case you can enforce a reboot. So that's the.
You could also put in a patch policy reboot behavior and set it on to enable and notify users that way.
Yeah. But then if you then say, well, you can ignore, yeah, obviously you can say, well, you need to reboot, and so you can say, well, you need to wait for so long, so you can actually make it that it just reminds people once a day, and after, like, you can make it as long as you want. Yeah, so yeah, that's the built-in option. If you want to trigger on the pending reboot state, yeah, that's something separate.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, here in your patch policy, patch. So here we got. So here you can make this as long as you want. Yeah. So if you do enable this patch policy reboot, you can make this hours, and you can say, well, you can have every 24 hours you're gonna have the snooze interval, or maybe make it a little bit less, and you make this 240. That means that it will take 10 days before it actually enforces the reboot.
We don't want that.
So that would be one option. One thing I forgot to mention, in the session, I've explained that you can do, that we have this on-demand content system now. So on-demand means that if the workstation wants to do the scan, it will download the last version of the signature file. If it applies policy, it will actually then request the policy of it. Will request the patch from the system, and the system will then download it from the internet if it's not available. If you want it to be more similar to what you've had before, that things are already cached within your system, you can say, I would like to do this prefetch. Well, prefetch, you can do that manually. Well, that's if you go to your list of patches and you say, well, I would like to cache this patch. You can also say, well, I would like to do that on patch policy rebuild. That means that all patch policies that are part of your patch policy, all patches that are part of your patch policy, and they will actually get cached already. So it will download the patch content to your primary server and distribute that to your satellite servers. And that's what we call pre-cache. Or prefetch of these patches. Below that, you see here all these languages as well, so you can specify that you want to do that for certain languages. The vast majority of patches is multilingual. So this is only applicable to very few vendors that have language-specific versions. So in your case, you would be able to enable Danish. But it actually doesn't make too much difference because it's it will do that. Most patches are like the Microsoft patches are all multilingual anyway, so doesn't matter too much. So this is the way that you can enable that. Let me just click OK in that one. Any remaining questions?
Ron, can you repeat the dates for when the new patch management system is a demand?
The old feed will expire at the 31st of May 2024. So the old feed will go offline on the 23rd of May 2024. So before that, you have to have migrated.
Thank you. Well, I guess everyone that this was all we had today. We do have upcoming webinars in a short while of time. Actually, the next one with open text is on the 19th of October, where we're going to talk about protecting data. Thank you so much for your time, and I wish you all a very nice day.